Chapter 10. Once War Breaks Out. Wednesday evening, the 30th of August, 1939. "You can't go camping at this time like this, Matilda," said Mum as they finished tea. "Germany's threatening to invade Poland and we don't know when it might start up here. What if you're in a tent and the bombs start falling or we're all gassed? What do you say, Dad?" Her mother frowned and clattered plates together. Tilly's head dropped. If Mum wasn't on her side, then Dad certainly wouldn't be. But Dad said, "I think it's a very good idea." "You do?" said Tilly, her head jerking upwards. "It'll help you toughen you up a bit with the war coming. But only one night, mind, and don't go making work for Donald and Megan. The grown-ups have enough to do. Time for the news, Mother." It was 6 o'clock, and as usual, a tense silence fell over the household. They went into the sitting room and sat down. Outside the open window, nothing stirred, as if the whole neighbourhood, even the birds, were listening and waiting for the news no one wanted to hear. "This is London," boomed out the solemn tones of the newsreader as the final chimes of Big Ben echoed round the house. Tilly sat cross-legged on the floor and flicked through a comic, only half listening while the newsreader droned on about Hitler and the British Navy mobilising. "But Poland remains in grave danger. The Prime Minister is going to Buckingham Palace for talks with the King this evening. The government has sent another message to Herr Hitler to try and avert war." Then there came the words that made Tilly's blood run cold. "And the government has made it clear that no pets will be allowed in public air raid shelters once war breaks out." Tilly felt her throat close up and a shudder went through her. A picture of loud bangs and everyone running in the street came to her mind. She would be carrying Bonnie as she arrived at the door of the public shelter. Ted Bell would block her way, rifle ready, saying, "No pets in here, love. Best shooting her. It's the kindest thing to do." "Tilly, whatever's the matter with you?" her mother said, frowning as Dad switched off the radio. Tilly let out a loud sob and said, "Poor Bonnie. Even if she finds a shelter, they won't let her inside." It wasn't difficult to let a couple of tears fall, and Mum reached down and patted her knee. "Well, that's what the government's decided," said Dad, looking over at Tilly as she sat on the carpet. "They're setting up the anti-aircraft battery in the park, and I saw a barrage balloon go up this evening beyond the factory. Speaking of which," his voice deepened and Tilly held heads jerked up, "what's this I hear about kids hiding their pets near the canal in those old factories? The neighbours were talking about it. What do you know about that, Tilly?" Tilly looked down at her comic, chills running up and down her spine. "Has someone given us away already?" "I haven't heard anything, but I'll keep an ear out," she murmured, and then she blew her nose very loudly on her handkerchief. Dad gave a bit of a snort, but he went out of the room, which was a relief. "You don't eat very much at tea," said Mum. "No, I am not very hungry tonight." "I hope you're not going down with something," said her mother, feeling her forehead. "No, honest, Mum, I'm fine. I'm just so sad without my darling Bonnie." "Well, perhaps it was best that she ran off. She can forage for herself, can't she?" said Mum in a soothing voice. Tilly gave a little nod, wiping her eyes with her handkerchief. Now," went on Mum, "I thought I'd make you some sandwiches to take you over to Rosie's in case you're hungry later. I don't want you bothering Megan." "Thanks ever so much, Mum. That would be lovely." Tilly walked carefully from the room and once out of sight, raced upstairs, her heart thumping. That was a close shave, she thought to herself. She couldn't wait to see Bonnie now, and feeling her rough tongue licking her face and smelling her musty doggy smell, she rolled up her torch in her blanket and pulled on an extra jumper and a second pair of socks. Then she ran downstairs again, calling out, "I'm ready." Mum came into the hallway holding a large paper bag of food. "There's enough to share. We don't want Rose's family to say we're mean. Gumboots, Mac, and take a warm scarf, please, Matilda. The late night air will turn cold." "He'll be warm as toast. I'll be as warm as toast," said Tilly. "I could come over and make sure the tent won't leak or fall down or anything," said Dad, leaning on the doorway of the sitting room, his face more relaxed. It reminded Tilly with a pang that the fun that they used to have all before this talk of war. Dad liked nothing better than talking to her and Mum and taking long walks down the canal, finding a corner to have a picnic, and he lit a small fire. Tilly would toast the bread from her sandwiches, and sometimes they stayed out until it was dark. All that was now over, now the war was coming, and the grown-ups were so short-tempered and worried all the time. She stared up at Dad's big brown eyes, crinkling round the edges as he grinned down at her, wanting to join with the fun. She hated to disappoint him, but she said, "Oh, no need, Dad. Donald's dying to do all that." Dad gave a shrug as if he didn't care, but she could see that he did. She kissed them both goodbye, went out of the front door, grabbed her bike and set off towards Rosie's house. It was still warm and sunny outside, and she couldn't help feeling at the edge of the great adventure. They were going to sleep outdoors for the very first time in their lives without any grown-ups, and like soldiers in a war, they were going to guard their pets. She glanced over her shoulder to check Mum and Dad were safely inside, and then she turned her bike back down the street and towards the canal. "Now's a good time to talk about the zoo when we get evacuated," Tilly told herself. "I think I've got a jolly good plan. I hope Rosie agrees." Up ahead, she saw Rosie on the bridge and called out, "Hi there!" As she cycled up alongside Rosie, Tilly blurted out the words she'd been holding in all day. "What are we going to do about the zoo when we're evacuated?" "Do you think we should ask Alec to take over? He's too young to be called up and too old to be evacuated, I think. So he could do it, couldn't he?" "Goodness, I haven't really thought about it. Yes, I suppose so. What do you think?" "I'm not sure, but we have to think of something. We go next Tuesday." They cycled along for a few moments, both deep in thought, and then Tilly called over her shoulder, "Oh, blow it. Let's forget about it for tonight." "That's the spirit," said Rosie. "Come on, then." They stood up on their pedals and rode over the bumpy ground to the fields until they reached the thicket. Pushing through the brambles, they went into the clearing and dropping their bikes on the grass. Tilly could hear Bonnie's joyful barking before she got to the door, and then all the animals started mewing and barking, squawking and squealing. Hanno had started to yap loudly, and Pirate seemed to be squawking back at him, as though they were having a proper conversation. "Do you think Pirate speaks German?" said Tilly as she bent down to release Bonnie. "Possibly," said Rosie. "Parrots are very intelligent. He almost said hello to me today, but I'm not sure when feeding him properly. So maybe he can't speak if he's hungry." She lifted Tinkerbell out of her crate and smoothed down the fur about her ears. "Oh, look, Tink's just opened an eye a bit. I think she's looking better today. What do you think?" Tilly glanced over at Tinkerbell and said, "Oh, yes." Even though she wasn't really sure, Tinkerbell hadn't really been well for a couple of days. Hopefully she'll get better soon. Before they made a plan for the future of the zoo. Bonnie ran outside and Tilly followed, enjoying the evening cool air on her bare legs. Gnats buzzed around her head and a bee settled on an open flower in a last ray of light. "If the bombs fall on our street, Bonnie," she said aloud, "I'll bring Mum and Dad to the den to sleep at the emergency zoo. Then they'll all be pleased that the children decided to save the pets, won't they?" As if she understood every word, Bonnie raised her head and fixed her liquid brown eyes on Tilly. They stood together quietly for a moment. Already the woods were settling down for the night. Pools of black were spreading under the trees, but somehow hiding away from the grown-ups made Tilly feel safe. The whole summer, with its boiling hot weather, crazy thunderstorms, and now the calm sunny days, had been so ominous, with the creeping closer and closer. Maybe if they had taken more notice sooner, they could have made a proper plan for all the animals. But all Tilly had wanted to do was play in their lovely den. The last few days, with all the worries and responsibilities for so many pets, had taken some of the fun away. But now, with a whole delicious night to look forward to, she felt the worries fall away from her shoulders. "We're going to have such fun, Bonnie Bonbons. Come on." Bonnie gave a high-pitched yap and they ran together back to the hut, where Miles was piling wood for a campfire. "Brought some potatoes, we can roast 'em," said Miles, nudging a bulging sack with his toe. "We'll have a feast." "A midnight feast, Tinkerbell," Rosie said as she sat cross-legged on the ground with her little cat. "The night belongs to the children," Tilly told herself, with a happy sigh.